You're listening to the Really Useful Podcast. This is the tech podcast for technophobes. My name is Christian Cawley, and with me is Ben Stegner. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing well, Christian. It's autumn time here in full swing, although we got a little bit of heat still, so it's a nice time of year, I think. I'm happy.
It sounds, is it as picturesque as it sounds?
Yeah, it is. The leaves haven't quite started falling yet because it's still like in the 70s or I guess like 21 or 23 Celsius. So it's still a little bit warmer for the proper fall, but it's a pretty time.
Sounds beautiful. If only we had cyborg trees. Then again, maybe that's not such a good idea because maybe someone will accidentally shut them down and then they won't work.
That would be a shame.
Wouldn't it just? We're joining you, or you're joining us, at the kind of the end of the great Facebook shutdown of 2021, which we're going to go into in a lot more detail shortly to help you understand what happened, where your photos went, all that stuff. We're also going to be discussing VPNs for gaming. Virtual private networks are a privacy measure that you can take, and they have some advantages for gaming, particularly online gaming. But first, it's Facebook.
Yesterday, we saw Facebook get taken off the internet. I don't know why it went down, but I know that for more than 5 hours, Facebook wasn't used to deepen divides, destabilize democracies, and make young girls and women feel bad about their bodies.
Now, in the UK, it was a bit different for us here because basically what happened is we woke up on October the 4th and Facebook was there and we carried on about our day doing things, dipping into Facebook from time to time as you do, maybe sharing photos, updating what you did on the weekend, all that kind of thing. I'm imagining in the US, you woke up and it just wasn't there.
Yeah, I think it started happening about 11:45 a.m. Eastern time.
So if you had to lie in, it wasn't there.
Yeah, it was about it was about the middle of the day for us on the East Coast, and then if you're in California or whatever, it was more when you were waking up and starting your day. So I guess it depends on where you were located, how much of a catastrophe it was.
Yeah, totally. Now, the interesting thing about this, you probably know Facebook went, and it was as if it just never existed at one point. There is a kind of a progression of events linked to this, although it might be that they weren't actually linked and it was all a coincidence. So, first of all, there's the Facebook employee turned whistleblower who made some bold claims on 60 Minutes. And this is Francis Horgan, the Facebook whistleblower. And there's a bombshell report known as the Facebook Files, and her identity was revealed in an interview on CBS News' 60 Minutes. And to summarize, it's basically 5 key claims that Facebook's algorithm shows you hateful and divisive content intentionally for engagement. Facebook is profiting from showing you hateful and divisive content. Facebook chooses profit over safety. Facebook is lying to you, yes, you listener, about its fight against hate, violence and misinformation, and that Instagram is harming teenage girls. Now, of those claims, 5 is kind of semi-obvious, and not just teenage girls either, I would argue. And the other things are, well, I mean, I think it depends on which side of the divide of whether you think something is hateful and divisive or not, because, you know, these things are objective, and declaring one thing that you just simply disagree with as quote-unquote hateful or divisive is not constructive, it could be argued. Now, the interesting...
I would agree.
Yeah.
I think that, because I don't want to get into too much of the law and stuff here, but I think divisive specifically, I mean, on one hand, I feel like that's kind of what makes life interesting, like divisive, I don't know if content's the right word, like sharing something that some people agree with and some people disagree with and having an interesting discussion about it. I feel like that's kind of the point ostensibly of social media, you know, like,
Ah,
how do you feel about this? Like, let's talk about it. I know that never happens and it just devolves into a shouting match and all that, but um, hateful, that's its own can of worms. But divisive, I mean, I don't know. Just because people don't agree on something doesn't mean it's bad or shouldn't be discussed.
yeah, I would agree there, and of course, I mean, there's that whole shouting match thing. I mean, none of it's constructive, really, I suppose. But then again, you kind of want to get away from that sort of not just the echoes and the echo chambers, but also that sort of notion that I often think that Twitter, and I have some great people that I follow and interact with on Twitter, and I wouldn't normally include them in this kind of declaration. It's kind of a more generalized description that Twitter is kind of what the world would be like if everyone was telepathic, because very few people take the time to self-edit their tweets. They just press the plus button, edit, to compose a new tweet, issue some nonsense, and send it without having a moment to think of the consequences or whether they actually even mean it in many cases. So, anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never really thought of it like that.
Yeah. But the thing is about the Facebook thing is that it was then kind of highlighted that after the broadcast that Facebook's, or in the immediate run up to the broadcast, that Facebook share price was dropping. But that had actually been happening since September the 24th. And there were some people that linked the two things of it dropping so suddenly. I think it dropped 5%, but it had actually dropped by a similar amount, not the same percentage, but to a similar degree about a week ago. So, it is. We're probably not going to know exactly what happened with Facebook, but this is one of the key things leading up to it, and this whistleblower is now going to be sharing the frightening truth, quote unquote, with the US Senate. In fact, is doing so as we record this on Tuesday publicly in Congress. We're recording this on Tuesday this week. Frances Hogan said that she came forward because I recognized a frightening truth. Almost no one outside of Facebook knows what happens inside Facebook. The company's leadership keeps vital information from the public, the US government, its shareholders, and governments around the world. Now, this is particularly, I mean, as if it wasn't bad enough, there is a former UK politician called Nick Clegg who was given a very prominent role at Facebook in the area of transparency. And, I mean, that's not his exact job title. He's not like sort of director of area of transparency. But, that was it. The implication was that his appointment was that things would help to be more clear. This is a politician who, in 2010, in an election campaign, declared there would be no increase in in tuition fees for students at university. And then he engaged in a coalition government with the Conservative Party, which is currently led by Boris Johnson, you may have heard of at the time, David Cameron, and they brought in a trebling of tuition fees for students. So the idea that this is an MP, a politician, or a personality who has any interest in transparency is something I find endlessly amusing.
Yeah, I think if you're going to bring someone onto your team as a transparency head or whatever his title was, I think that a politician's probably the worst type of person to do it with. Yeah. You think you'd be better off hiring like a hacker or like
serial killer,
a journalist or an activist that's going to actually not want to cover things up, which is like a politician's entire job description.
Yeah, totally.
It seems like a pretty bad choice.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot going on with that. We can't check in with what's going on right now with that, but I dare say there'll be some heavy impact from that. Isn't that? Oh no, sudden impact. I nearly actually said sudden impact. It's a Clint Eastwood movie, isn't it? Quick. Moving on from that, then Facebook vanished, as we described earlier. And at first, it was just like a typical page where when you've typed in the wrong URL, it was that type of reaction from your browser. There'd be nothing there. Facebook app would work on a mobile device, but you wouldn't be able to refresh anything. And this continued for a few hours, and then there was the insane appearance of a "We'll be back soon," but it was dated 2020.
Oh, I don't think I actually saw that part.
Yeah.
I didn't really try to go on Facebook very much when it was out. I like noticed it early on, and then I knew I couldn't use WhatsApp to message my friends because
Yeah.
we have a couple group chats there. But I don't think I ever saw the message from 2020. That's a blunder.
Yeah, it was quite amusing. And then, just on the share price, as we record this, I mean, it's at 332.96 a share. A few days ago, it was at 382. So that that's a huge drop in share price. I'm not someone who follows share prices, but I'm certainly someone who can appreciate that's a big drop, and it's probably the lowest it's been in 2021. Now, as all this was happening, everyone going on Facebook. There's nothing there. What's happened? Oh, let's join Twitter. So people either join Twitter or relaunch their Twitter accounts, and you might find some interesting conversations there. Maybe like a strange exchange between Jack Dorsey and the people behind the Facebook Twitter account and the WhatsApp Twitter account, and amusing things. And then the conspiracy theories start. And then it got really weird. There was this idea that Facebook had been completely deleted, and someone shared a list of IP addresses, and this went viral. Everyone was looking at this list of IP addresses, and they were presented as being a sort of a trace route, a ping, listing of all the IP addresses related to Facebook. It was nothing of the sort. In fact, as I understand it, was an old screenshot and from something else that had been kind of represented with a few words around it, which just, that's key piece of sort of like PR and propaganda there, just taking an image and then adding words to it to change its context completely.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm sure we've talked about this before, or someone has. It's nothing new, but it's crazy how when not breaking news, obviously Facebook going down isn't like a serious world event in the grand scheme of things, but still,
Sure.
It is crazy how when something like this happens with an extended outage, you can just take a random screenshot and then share it and say that, this shows that Facebook's been completely deleted. And
Yeah.
like 30 minutes later, it's back up totally fine. And it gets 100,000 retweets because people see it and think, "Wow, that's some scary code." What's that? That looks weird. The old, "A lie gets halfway around the world" quote. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff floating around from people that probably had no idea what they were talking about.
Yeah. And what actually happened is that the DNS, domain name system, that allows the internet to run by translating domains into IP addresses, Facebook's DNS records and BGP, Border Gateway Protocol records, went wrong. And this is possibly due to an update, but the update that deleted these DNS, it sends out this update to the DNS system saying it's all gone now, which means that no subsequent message could be sent out. That's basically what happened. And so you then have people like Mike Schretfer tweeting, "Sincere apologies to everyone impacted by outages of Facebook-powered services right now." So Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, etc. We are experiencing networking issues. Anti-networking issues. That is such an understatement.
I was going to say networking issues.
And teams are working as fast as possible to debug and restore as fast as possible. And do you know what? I mean, I have been in the middle of some absolutely terrible outages in my time, and they fixed that pretty quickly.
I mean, for how big of a meltdown
Yeah.
it seemed to be, it was out for what, 6 hours, maybe 7 hours. So it was big. I said in our Slack, I can only imagine how many millions of dollars a company loses like that, just not having any of its services available for that long. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it's not like it was days,
Exactly. And I mean, you mentioned WhatsApp before. Is that what you missed when this happened?
Well, I mean, I'm working when it's on, so it's not like, I talk to my friends on WhatsApp, but it's not like it's, if I can't talk to them for 2 hours, I'm going to have a conniption. So, I mean, that's what I missed the most out of the three, I guess, because I would just like send them like memes and just stupid stuff throughout the day if I think of it. So, But yeah, I think that's probably the most. I mean, it depends on on who you are, right? If you're a
Sure.
business that relies on Facebook for talking to your employee, or not your employees, your customers, or just getting information out there, that's the most important. A lot of people use Instagram for the same thing, but so many people in the world use WhatsApp like as their messaging app,
Yeah.
like the only one they use. Or maybe if they don't use WhatsApp, then their backup is Facebook Messenger. Well, when both of those go out,
Exactly. Yeah.
what do you do? You're talking to someone in another country, you can't text maybe because you get an overcharge or whatever. But
I think the amount of time it was offline for as well, you get to the point where, they fixed it quickly. But there is that there's that moment past where you're thinking, what if I'm not going to be able to speak to my sister again? I haven't got a phone number. Or what's happened to all my photos? All these things, I made this wonderful, I uploaded a video to Facebook. I'm never going to see it again.
yeah, it's almost like that feeling you get when you jump in the pool and your phone's in your pocket and you realize you haven't backed up, that kind of thing.
I've
Like
never done that. Have you done that?
Something I have not, but
Okay.
I've known several people that have. I've been pretty much since I was in college. I've been pretty serious about backing up. So I would like to think even if I did do something like that, I would have pretty much everything backed up. I did. I remember actually. Well, wasn't my fault, but in college, it was actually right when I was sitting down to write my first sample article to apply for make use of. My computer's hard drive died in my laptop, like literally as I sat down to write the article. But I had thankfully, I think that was right after I had signed up for Backblaze, so I had everything backed up. But yeah, it's that feeling of, a lot of people, the stuff they share on Facebook, they probably don't have, maybe like they don't have it backed up to their computer, or maybe they shared a video and then they ran out of space on their phone, so they deleted the video off their phone, and Facebook's the only place they have it. Yeah, that could be a big concern for people. Or yeah, you're right. Someone you chat with from high school or something whose number you don't have any other way to get a hold of them. It would be kind of weird if Facebook just disappeared. I think some people were kind of hoping it would, but
Well, from what I saw, yeah. I think as well, it's worth pointing out that it wasn't just the outside world that was affected by it. Facebook's workplace and internal site, says Jane Manchun Wong, were also having DNS issues. And, there's places that Facebook staff couldn't get into, or the keycard's not working correctly. So it's basically a complete misconfiguration and of their network services, and they did delete themselves. They removed themselves completely from the internet, but were fortunately able to return to the internet.
Yeah, I did see that they were having trouble. Their key cards weren't working. I also saw something say that they had to cut into the cage of the servers using a grinder, which that was not true. That was one of those rumors that was floating around early. Kind of paints a funny picture, like they couldn't get into the server because their key card didn't work, so they had to slice into it. But that's not the truth, apparently.
I saw a report saying that they were having to send a team to a remote server to reboot it or something. I was getting sort of Resident Evil vibes.
Yeah, right. The door's closed,
Yeah.
pours in. It is October, so fitting time for a little horror scenario there.
Totally, yeah. So yeah, that is basically what happened. That's why your Facebook went and it didn't come back for hours on end, and you were left wondering what you're actually going to do with your life without Facebook, other than go on Twitter. You didn't have to go that low. Facebook's back. You don't have to plumb the depths of social networking on Twitter. It will never happen to you.
The cesspool of Twitter.
The cesspool of Twitter. Yeah,
I like to think that people use it as an opportunity to do something outside of social media, but I feel like most people probably didn't do that.
Probably not. No. The thing is about Facebook is that it is so vast and all-encompassing. I mean, my wife is a local councillor, so she's involved in local politics and local community issues. She has a page on there that she shares stuff to, the things that she's been doing, any groups that are getting contact with her looking for volunteers and stuff like that, she'll share that. And she couldn't access any of that, and she's certainly not, I mean, there are like fully I was going to say fully grown, that's patronizing, full-blown politicians who their Facebook is their outlet to the world, or their Twitter or whatever. But then you've got small businesses, you've got schools and colleges and community groups, baby businesses. I said baby. What was it? Nascent businesses. They're taking their first steps into commercial life using Facebook maybe as a replacement or a proxy for an actual website, because you can just go on Facebook and set up a page, and it's a website for your business rather than having to pay for hosting fees and setup fees and web design.
And
all
everyone
that.
can just search for it.
Exactly.
And it's there.
And then it's gone. No one's going to find you. So I would imagine. I mean, you mentioned figures of how much it cost Facebook, but I mean the actual cost of Facebook not being online to the businesses that use Facebook could be astronomical. Especially,
I guess we'll probably never really know.
Probably not. No.
Take all the millions of small businesses around every country around the world.
Yeah,
that's a lot of people affected.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on. Virtual private networks are they're usually associated with people who want to keep their activity online secret. So what would that have to do with online gaming? Well, you would be surprised. There are actually many reasons why gamers should use a gaming-friendly VPN. We've listed tell them out of practice, can't you? We've listed 7 reasons that you should subscribe to a paid VPN service, because after all, a free VPN is a complete waste of time. And this will enhance your gaming experience. I'm going to show you how this will enhance your gaming experience. And then I'm going to ask Ben to challenge me on that. Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'll get my challenging hat on.
Okay. So you can play games from overseas servers, first of all. With a paid VPN installed on your PC, router or console, you'll be able to connect to a game server on the side of the planet via a server in the same region. And this is quite a simple feature of VPNs, that you can sort of use IP addresses and servers in different countries. And so you could be playing a new game today that's released. Say a game is released in Japan today but isn't coming out in the US or Europe until next week or next month. Via a VPN, you can potentially be playing it before it comes out. You can also play while traveling. Say you're normally based in North America, but you're going to stay in Japan. How will you maintain a connection with your usual gaming server? Well, as soon as you connect to the internet in the destination country, instead of using the local servers, you connect to your usual regional server via a VPN.
So, can I challenge the first two?
So go on then.
I'm going to step into my new role. So I think the first one is good, playing new titles earlier. I've never tried this, and I imagine it would probably depend on the service. PlayStation might have some different rules than, say, Nintendo does.
Mm-hmm.
If you would probably also need an account registered in that region, which now you can do, I think, pretty easily on every major system. I know on my Switch, like I have a Japanese user account, which all I had to do was make a new Nintendo account and just say I live in Japan. You don't need a Japanese credit card or anything. And then when you go on the eShop, you can see games that are only in Japan. There might be some demos that are there early. As far as playing games before they arrive, like digitally, I think it would work, but you'd probably need to make sure you have the right account too. And you may have to use that account always to play the game, or there may be other restrictions, but I think that would work.
Sure. I mean, you're looking at that from a very Switch point of view, and that's absolutely fine, because this is a slightly older article. I was playing Terra, Tera, and which is originally a Korean game, and I was working on a book about it, so I was basically playing both versions at the same time. And so the Korean version was slightly different to the Western version. And,
okay.
So I was using
I'm
a
thinking
VPN.
of playing it early. That makes sense. Yeah, playing a different version.
Yeah.
And then playing while traveling, that's good too. You just have to remember that there's probably going to be lag.
There is probably going to be lag, depending on...
If you're in Japan and you're trying to play on US servers, it'll work. It's just there's going to be higher latency. So for any game that's really fast-paced, probably not going to be too great, but it'll at least let you jump on with your friends.
Sure. And you can also potentially access exclusives from anywhere. We kind of... gone into that already. It can work on Xbox and PSN. Whether or not it still works, that's something that I'm going to have to look into, I'm afraid. Now, a fast connection to a VPN server in the same region as a gaming server can I'm not saying it will, and it's not going to work every time. And this is again related to what we're saying, but it can reduce lag and ping times. That will depend on the speed of your own internet and the quality of the VPN server and its connection to the game server. That is a potential improvement over what you may already have, but it's one of those things you need to try rather than rely on. So say if your ISP is squeezing the internet traffic and you're using a VPN, then they don't know what the data is. So you bypass that traffic management that the ISP is using, and it's all related to that.
Right, and potentially, again, this really depends on where you are, where your ISP servers are, where the servers are for the game that you're playing, and all that kind of thing. But potentially, if your data is going through a VPN server that's close to the game server, it might be a little bit more efficient than if it's going through the server that you would normally be connected to at home. It does depend.
Yeah.
And when you're adding a step, sometimes you would increase latency because you have to go through more servers, but it depends on your situation. So it's definitely something to try for your case.
Totally. I mean, basically, if you're having slow reactions, ping times, and your latency's poor with the online game that you're playing, then it's worth trying with a VPN to just try that. And it's called throttling, and it's not a nice thing that ISPs do, but it's all about managing their resources, and not much you can do about it apart from use a VPN. You can also play potentially multiplayer titles from any region. Region-locked multiplayer games can be accessed via a VPN, and you can also, and I think this is probably most important, protect your data. Online gaming servers require constant attention from admins who monitor performance and security. And there's regular patching to deal with security issues, but vulnerabilities found by hackers can be exploited. But with a VPN, you're running an encrypted connection to your game server, making it more difficult. Now, these days, I want to say that every online game client, on whether you're using a PC or a mobile phone or a Switch or a PlayStation 5 or whatever, is making an encrypted connection to its destination game server. I would really like to say that, but as we've learned over the past few months, that isn't necessarily going to be the case, because when you think someone is encrypting something, it quite often turns out that they're actually not encrypting something. So
yeah, I think it depends. And I also think too, this is another one that depends on the game and the instance, because I think that when you say you use your Xbox to connect to Battlefield servers and play, I don't think that necessarily there's anything that's in transmission when you're playing that would be valuable if someone were to break in and take it. Obviously if you're logging into an account or something, that's different. But if you're just playing a game and someone were able to sniff what you were doing and see that you were playing on this map and with this gun, I don't really know what that would do, unless there was some kind of vulnerability in the game where they were able to exploit that and then take over your account or something. So a lot of this is theoretical, but there's, a lot of it depends on you trusting the console company, the company that runs the network you're playing on, so like PlayStation Network, and then the company that makes the game and runs the servers, trusting them that they're handling your data properly.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember there was a guy who stole the credentials of another EVE Online player some years ago, and that made that made newspapers, the impact that had and the amount of money the guy had made in game. So
yeah, it depends on the game too. If it's a game that's really big on like trading, if it's like Team Fortress 2 or CS:GO or something where there's a bunch of items that you can get and sell for potential large amounts of real money, that's more attractive to someone than, your Splatoon account that doesn't really have any value on its own.
Agree. Now, there are some, you probably know you can use VPN with a PC. You can also use it with other devices. The best way to use a VPN is with a router, but not all routers are compatible to be set up with a VPN account without modification, in which case you need to go for individual devices. Make use of writer Emma Collins told us about various gaming consoles that you can play using a VPN. And this is just a brief list. Can you use a VPN on a PS4 or PS5? Yes, you can. But you have to configure your router for that to be possible. can you use a VPN on your Xbox One? Yes, you can. There are different ways you can do this. You can configure your PC as a route for the VPN. So basically, rather than your Xbox One connecting directly to the internet, it would connect to your PC and then onto the internet. There is also a media streamer option, so you can set which some VPNs provide, which you can enter as a sort of a replacement DNS in your Xbox.
So I remember doing something like this in college.
Okay.
Little story time here
Yeah.
about a VPN with games. So when I was in my junior year of college, the first Destiny game came out, and I got it because I thought the idea sounded cool. But Destiny is always online. Like you cannot even start the game if you're not online. And the problem was at my college, they used a proxy server to connect everyone to the network for security, and most online services and games didn't work. Some did, but it was very random. Like you would just buy a game and it might work, it might not. So I bought Destiny and it didn't work, of course. So I tried to do a bunch of stuff to figure out how to connect. And what I ended up doing was, so we had a dock they gave us for our laptop, and they had some kind of configuration on the computers because it was school issued laptops. So they had like stuff in the firmware. When you had Ethernet connected, which I normally did, it disabled the Wi-Fi. So I ended up buying a wireless adapter that basically it gave me Wi-Fi when I was wired in. And then I forget what the app was called, Connectify, I think maybe, that lets you broadcast your computer's connection as a Wi-Fi network. And then I found a VPN that the college's network actually let me use. There were like a bunch of them were always blocked, but this one worked. So I would connect my computer to the VPN and then start Connectify and then broadcast the network as a wireless access point using that adapter. And that let me play. Connectify would cut out sometimes, and it was kind of janky, but I felt pretty good about finding all those pieces of the puzzle that all work together.
Well done. Nice one, yeah. So, some VPN services provide what they refer to as like a media streamer thing, which gives more reliable video streams, but they're not really for gaming. They are for watching video apps and things like that. So, and again, with the Nintendo Switch, there is no method of installing a VPN software and then configuring it, because that brings us back to the router. Really, the only reliable way, rather than routing it via your PC, is to set up the VPN on your router, which means you're not going to be relying on the router provided by your ISP in most cases. You're either going to have to buy a router or find a way of hacking the one that you've got and then installing custom router firmware, such as DDWRT or Tomato router or any of those things. Now, as with every other previous edition of the Really Useful podcast and those yet to come, everything that we've discussed in the episode you will be able to find in the show notes. Until next time, it's goodbye from myself, Christian Cawley, and from him, Ben Stegner.
We will see you later, and go enjoy Facebook if you haven't already, huh?